Welcome, everyone. My name is David Hamilton. I'm the founder and chairman of the America's Future Series, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this edition of Future Talks, our podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by three really brilliant people. Two of them, Joe Laban and Ken Lusinger from See Here. They are the host of our 222 event, our National Security Dual Use Technology Showcase, where we're honoring General Keith Alexander. And with his organization, IronNet, we're honored to have Dr. Michael Ehrlich, and they'll be having a conversation about the future of cybersecurity, the state of it now, et cetera. And I think if you sit back, you're going to have a really interesting time here listening to these people share their wisdom and their insights. So thank you for joining us. So I think I'll start, if it's all right, with Joe and with Ken. We'll ask you to tell us a little bit about See Here, its technology, et cetera, and maybe a little bit about why you're associated or helping sponsor and host our event on 222.
If I could take this one, Joe. What See Here is, they're a technology company that found a way to blend different disparate files together, different file types together, then realized that you can encrypt each one of those files separately. And that has far-ranging national security and e-commerce and banking implications. It's really the future of data. And we thought that this would be for the military, for the intelligence community, for the federal government, and for people in that space to use and implement our API. And so we thought we'd be a part of America's Future Series and see what we can do to help.
We thank you for your support. Joe, if you would, I'm going to give a brief introduction to Dr. Ehrlich here for a second, but then we'll ask you to go ahead and moderate and host this discussion.
That's good.
So Dr. Ehrlich, we're honored to have you with us. We appreciate your joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Michael Ehrlich is the Chief Technology Officer for IronNet. This is a firm founded by General Keith Alexander. And he has over 20 years of experience in offensive and defensive cybersecurity operations, cybersecurity-related policy, public policy, and engineering design and integration. His cybersecurity expertise is grounded in 10 years of service at the National Security Agency, spanning engineering, development, operations, and leadership positions. Before coming to IronNet, Michael served as Chief of Operations for Defense Cybersecurity Organization within the NSA, defined and drafted significant portions of National Security Presidential Directive 54, Homeland Security Presidential Directive 23, also known as the Comprehensive National Cyber Initiative. He's led technology efforts at Blackbird Technologies, which was acquired by Raytheon, and spent time as a research faculty member at Johns Hopkins University. Michael, really appreciate your being here with us.
Happy to participate, David.
Thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Laban, and you guys look forward to hearing this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. And Michael, thank you for taking your time today to be with us here. We mentioned the Comprehensive National Cyber Initiative, and I think we'll start there. In 07-08, you helped draft portions of that, the Comprehensive National Cyber Initiative. So how does that state of cybersecurity, or the state of cybersecurity today, really compare to nearly 15 years ago now?
Yeah, well, I wish I could say that things get better with age, but my hair is not one of those things, and neither is cybersecurity, right? If we go back to that time frame, to 2007, 2008, and looked at where at least the U.S. was with respect to cybersecurity back then, I think there were a couple of defining moments just prior to that time frame that the CNCI was trying to be in response to. So the first of those would have been the discovery in 2004 of a massive Chinese exploitation effort against U.S. Federal civilian, DoD, and DoD contractors that has fallen under the name of Titan Rain, right? But that was one of the first times where the U.S. as a whole government, was really under attack, if you will, was really being exploited by an incredibly capable nation state. And so I think the government at that time was reeling a bit from that discovery, from how pervasive that attack had been. And at the same time, starting around 2005 was where we really started on the commercial side, or I'll say the criminal side, to start seeing an increase in threat actors breaking into or exploiting private organizations. And the thing they were after back then, of course, there's always the IP, right? There's always IP that they're after to make their countries more competitive. But the criminal element at that time, they were really going after credit cards. They were going after that sort of personal information, and they were trying to monetize those credit cards before credit card companies could do something about it. So I think back in that time frame, those were the sort of the strategic impact and the tactical things that the U.S. was focused on. And now zip forward 14 years, right? 2008 was only 14 years ago. But to think about the things that have happened since then that have sort of redefined the battlefield. They've redefined the battlefield, right? So first of all, if you look back at 2010, 2010 was well, it wasn't hard to discover, but the discovery of Stuxnet, right? The first time that a cyber tool had been used to cause real physical damage to critical infrastructure, right? To the uranium centrifuges in Iran. So that's the first time that a nation state, I believe it was a nation state at least, took action, right, to disable a core part of critical infrastructure in a particular country. You go up from there to 2014, 2015. That was the start of what I would call widespread state-sponsored disinformation, right? Whether you believe or not that disinformation campaigns had any effect on the 2016 US presidential election, I don't know, but it is uncontrovertible that the Russians engaged in disinformation campaigns to seed divisiveness in our country, right? And so that was really, at the scale it was done, that was really a new thing. And then the other big thing on the strategic level, right, is that in 2015, right, you had the attacks against the Ukraine power grid just prior to Russia moving into Crimea, right? So again, another notable attack by one nation state against critical infrastructure in another. And so, I mean, look at today, right? Russia's still knocking on the door of Ukraine. I have no doubt that they are, if they are thinking about invading, that invasion will be coupled with a corresponding cyber attack, because why wouldn't they take every advantage? That's sort of the strategic side. So those strategic threats are still there. But the criminal element, I mean, that's the one that has really gotten masterful, right?
Right.
So again, back in 2008 timeframe, we were stealing credit cards. And so now the criminals have learned to monetize their activity much quicker, right? We call it ransomware. And that ransomware has evolved at a pace that most defenders are unprepared for. They've changed their tactics. Early in the days of ransomware, right? They would ransom your machines, and if you paid them, maybe they would give you the key. And now, before they ransom your machines, they take your IP, right? They download all your email. They look for things on people's computers that probably shouldn't be there. And during the negotiation process, if the target of the ransomware attack is thinking about not paying, right? The perpetrator now says, oh, by the way, I'm about to release this set of documents, right? This news thing, right? It's double extortion. So they've gotten much more effective at monetization. And what has helped them is the criminal elements around the world have gotten much better at sharing capabilities. They've got much faster at changing slightly the capabilities that they deploy to evade what I would call sort of legacy signature-based detection. So I think the threat actors have become much better at what they do, and the defenders are still oftentimes stuck playing catch up. Yeah. So there's some big changes.
Yeah. Well, and so, with the sophistication of these cyber criminals, today. And how does cybersecurity as usual, not working? Like the way that we approach things right now, where are we behind?
Yeah, I work for a cybersecurity company, right? And so I would say cybersecurity is working and it isn't working, right? Certainly there are tools that absolutely help organizations better defend their infrastructure, right? They are absolutely out there. I don't believe any of those tools can actually stop a breach from a dedicated adversary, okay? They can make the walls higher, they can make the walls thicker, they can make you run from the bear faster than your buddy back there. So maybe you're not as interesting a target, right? But the adversary is going to get you. When we think about, the totality of the adversary against the defender, unlike the defender, right? The adversaries are not encumbered by policies and law. They are not encumbered by manpower shortages. They are not encumbered by lack of financial resources, right? They have plenty of those. Oftentimes, if it's not a state adversary, it's a state-sponsored adversary, right? So there's plenty of money backing them. I think most people understand now, but I like to just say it, is that while it can be, some guy in a hoodie in a basement that's trying to exploit your organization, more likely you are being exploited by a real business that is making billions of dollars in revenue, has that money to spend on new techniques, and it's not the one guy in the hoodie, right? It's a workforce of thousands of people that are aligned against you. So that's challenging when you're an organization working alone, buying a tool here, a tool there, maybe hiring an MSSP, and trying to bring that all together in a very disjointed fashion to defend against the totality of, the adversary. Part of it's mentality, honestly, too, right? You still have a lot of organizations that struggle with the question, am I secure, right? How do I lock down my network? Well, you'll never be secure. Again, I believe the adversary will always be able to breach your network. So the questions really to be asking going forward is, right, how have I been exploited? How can I catch what's in my network? How can I recover faster? How can I make my infrastructure more resilient to attack? Because it's going to happen. How do I prepare for that inevitability? It's tough, and the adversaries are good at what they do.
So looking forward, then, what does cybersecurity look like to you in the next 5 to 15 years? Let's go out. Let's go out a bit.
I see increased number of threat actors and capabilities, right? Just because these tools are becoming more and more available to a wider range of threat actors, and more of them are going to hop on the money bandwagon, right? Ransomware offers an incredibly quick road to monetization of a little bit of effort on the adversary's part to return. If you were to look in business terms, return on investment. Return on investment of a ransomware attack is huge compared to what any legitimate business is going to return on an investment, right? Yeah. And so wherever there's money, there will always be people trying to steal it. So I don't think that's going away. Some of the things I worry about for the future, I don't think influence operations are going away. I think they're going to become broader. They're going to be more focused and perhaps even a little more nuanced. And by influence operations, I really mean disinformation campaigns, right? Getting citizens of a country, getting users of a particular application, whatever that influence campaign is, to change from one line of thought to another, right? To support a particular policy that 6 months ago they never would have thought about supporting, to support with their wallets. Sorry, you can't see my wallet here. To support with their money causes that 6 months ago they never would have thought of supporting, but now because influence has been coming in so many different directions, they're starting to think, well, maybe I should support that cause, right? Maybe I should give my social security number and credit card information and mother's maiden name to this guy in email. It sounds like he really needs it. So I worry about the expanding disinformation campaigns we're going to see. I really worry about identity. I've already had my identity stolen several times. I've had US federal tax returns submitted on my behalf that didn't come from me, right? I've had loans taken out in my name. And it's amazing to me that the bank can't call to verify my information, but the collection agency can, right? And so it's interesting, right? Because this concept of identity is closely linked with fraud and cybersecurity. And so everything I used to rely on, except for my parents, right? Everything I used to rely on to prove I'm me, other people have now, right? They know my driver's license number, they have my picture, they have my social security number, they know my mother's maiden name, they know where I live, they know what cars I owned, right? So how do you prove you're you? How do you prove you're you in anything going forward? It's a really, really hard problem. And I think the last one I would say is I continue to worry about what I would call battlefield preparation, right? I have no doubt that Russia spent years preparing the Ukrainian battlefield for present day, right? For the time when they are going to go in country with forces and they want to do something on the cyber side to make that takeover easier, more complete, more effective, more efficient, less deadly, whatever those things are. But make no mistake, right? They're doing that against other countries. I no doubt China is doing that, Iran is doing that, North Korea is doing that. All of our strategic adversaries are trying to prepare the US battlefield so that, when their commander calls on them, they can call down to their cyber battalion and say, hey, those 17 things we pre-deployed in critical infrastructure, we need to set them free now. US has long enjoyed the ability to project power around the globe, right? Because we have military bases around the globe. We've got carrier groups, right? There's projecting power. But almost any threat actor can project power now via cyber. And it makes the cyber landscape just a dangerous place. So I worry about all of that.
Yeah. It's all good and kind of unsettling points you make there. Well, let's talk about transformation. What technologies are needed to really transform cybersecurity going forward?
Yeah. So I think as a community, right, we need things. I've already mentioned that I have no doubt an organization can be breached, right? And so to really reduce the risk to any organization, the goal is to catch that breach as soon as possible after it occurs, right? Catch the breach before they have a chance to escalate privileges, before they have a chance to move laterally throughout your network, before they have a chance to download malware, whether it's ransomware or something that is going to give them persistent access for some time in the future, right? So detect them as quickly as possible. The way we do that now, most companies still use signature-based tools. So we rely on knowledge we've gained somewhere from 6 years to 6 weeks ago. That is now trickling down to my organization, your organization, as what we would call an indicator of compromise, right? Oh, here's a bad IP. Oh, here's a dangerous domain, or here's a bad file hash. And while it takes us really worldwide days, weeks, months to identify those IOCs, it takes the adversary seconds to minutes to change their infrastructure, to stand up a new domain, a new IP, to modify a file hash, so that those things get by our signature-based defenses. So we need to move to, I think, what I would call behavioral analytics, things that don't rely on the very specific characteristics of something, but look more at the overall activity and how something is behaving, how a server is behaving, how things like that are behaving on the network, to give an indication of whether something malicious is going on. So I think behavioral analytics that aren't signature based are an important step. Cybersecurity today is still a lone sport, right? Still an individual sport. We as a country are full of organizations. I'll tell you a story. Six years ago, when I started my journey with IronNet, I would talk to organizations about the idea of anonymously aggregating detection data before humans have ever looked at it, right? Cybersecurity detection data, and correlating that with other organizations of perhaps similar sectors, similar geography, similar size, whatever. And from that aggregation and correlation to see if we can more quickly discern new attacks. And I had so many organizations that 6 years ago said, look it, they'd say, Joe, Ken, it's to my competitive advantage if the other guy gets attacked, right? It's to my competitive advantage. And it turns out, right, it is not to New York's competitive advantage if New Jersey gets hit with a nuke, right? It's not, right? And so over the last 6 years, for many organizations that we talk to, that mindset has shifted, right? To we need more collaboration. We need to, I don't like the word share data, but we need to figure out a better way to more effectively use the data we have in a way that allows us to discover new attacks and distribute information in real time that is actionable, that is precise, that is specific to your organization. That's something I call attack intelligence. Right now, we still deal with threat intelligence, which means somebody from some other company that you don't know in a time zone that you're not familiar with has found something that you've not seen before. They've determined it to be malicious, and now they're telling you, they're saying, Ken, this IP here is hosting malware. Okay, what kind of malware? How do you know? What's it look like on my network, right? But it's very transactional. It's limited in context, and it's rarely actionable. And so I think that needs to change. And so this whole idea of collective defense, that's what IronNet, my company, is about, is how do we bring this sort of data-driven view across multiple organizations in a community to provide greater visibility and faster attack discovery. I think that's what we need.
Yeah. So you mentioned attack intelligence. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, and what that, what are those benefits, and how is that going to ensure a more secure future for us?
Yeah. So it's easiest, again, if I compare it to traditional threat intelligence, right? Most organizations subscribe to one or more threat intelligence feeds. The organizations that I've talked with find, I'll just say, limited value in a lot of those feeds, right? They may get hundreds to thousands of indicators a day. And I talked to one just a few weeks ago that said over a quarter, they got about 1.5 million indicators from a number of threat feeds, only 2 of which were relevant to them, only 2 of which actually mattered to them. But they still have to download the entire feeds, right? They have to figure out how to search the data they have for all of those indicators. So it's a lot of resources for very little return. The threat intel is like the weatherman saying, I don't know where you guys are located, I'm in Maryland, saying, hey, there's a storm headed for somewhere on the East Coast. Okay, is it hitting me?
Yeah.
How do I know? What do I have to check, right? Attack intelligence is a little different. Attack intelligence is something we provide customers where, again, we use this idea of collective defense, of aggregating and correlating data at scale globally to identify activity in your network that we believe to be malicious because it's activity we see spreading across a sector or a region because of our viewpoint, because someone else in your sector, if you're a financial services company, another financial services company has experienced that same behavior, and they just this second have identified it as malicious and written up a little report why that is, and in real time, because we assess that same behavior is absolutely affecting you, that notification goes out to you, right? That says, hey, Ken, you should know that based on Iron Dome data, right, this particular attack is ongoing in your organization right now, in your network right now. Here's why, and here's what you need to do about it, right? It's a very different. It's like saying, okay, Michael, at whatever my address is in Maryland, it's the weatherman saying, from 2 to 2:33 p.m., you're going to experience 1.2 inches of rain with, 12-mile-per-hour winds. 4 minutes later, that is going to stop. And it's very precise. It is very actionable intelligence. The real thing behind that is that most organizations don't have the manpower to act on things that aren't truly affecting them. And yet they do that all the time with threat intelligence feeds, right? And so what we're trying to do is provide accurate, timely, actionable, and precise intelligence down to the end user.
Thanks for explaining that. I appreciate it. Just kind of, you were mentioning earlier sort of about talks around power, sort of your power stance, and I want to switch gears here. So IronNet's co-founder, retired General Keith Alexander, mentioned that cyber is now used as an element of national power, right? So can you share your thoughts on what that means from a tech and implementation standpoint?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about how countries can use that power, just in the last week we've heard reports of Ukrainian government websites, right, going down, becoming unavailable because of massive denial of service attacks and things like that, and everyone believes that is maybe it's not Putin himself, but it's certainly folks acting on behalf of Russia, right? Sort of flexing their muscles, saying, look, I've got to be careful with my language. We can screw with you whenever we want, right? We can screw with you whenever we want. So be careful on how you respond to us. And I mean, that's really the basis of national power, right? The belief by one country, by one organization, that someone else has the ability to deny, disrupt, destroy whatever it is that they hold dear. And so cyber gives countries entree into that sort of power without a military, right? Without a Navy flotilla, right? Without Army, without long-range bombers. Those long-range bombs are deployed at a keyboard, and they can sit undetonated, right, in the adversary's network until called on. A lot of people ask, if Putin invades Ukraine, will he use his cyber tools? I've got no idea, right? But again, why wouldn't he? If he has designs on taking over Ukraine, right, because he wants some of the ports, he wants the land, he wants the big cities, right? He wants Odessa back. Why wouldn't you take every opportunity to use those tools that really minimize death and destruction, that put your forces at minimal risk? Use those first, right? Deny the enemy the ability to communicate, right? Turn power off, all while maintaining your ability to just walk right in against limited resistance. So yeah, I think that is becoming, huge. And back in, prior to the evolution of cyber, you would have like sabotage teams that went in there under cover of night, right, to take out the power plant or something like that, to do that. We don't have to do that now. We've got an easier method. And, my concern, and I sort of said this before, is that that's happening to us in the US right now. I have no doubt that other world powers are pre-positioning these sorts of destructive capabilities within our networks, so that when called upon, they can prove a point, but they say, hey Joe, I'm just going to show you what I can do, and some dam somewhere, something bad happens.
Yeah.
And now they've proven their point. It makes foreign policy a little bit harder, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how embedded they are in our networks. And so, it makes things harder.
So what are some other nation state threats then?
Yeah, well, our persistent frenemies. Some are frenemies. China is a frenemy, right? Our trade relations rely on them, but they are absolutely an adversary, right? My boss, General Alexander, one of his statements is that the IP theft from U.S. private industry to China is the greatest transfer of wealth in the entirety of the world, right? When other countries, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, right, anyone else, when they steal our IP, they are hurting our global competitiveness, right? They are eating into our superpower status, and that's what they want to do. They are diminishing our influence over the world, and so China's IP theft is a real problem for us. And then you've got the guys like, so the way I typically characterize it is Russia wants money, China wants IP, so that, it's still money, but it's money in the long run, right? It's making them more competitive globally in the long run. And then North Korea and Iran, they just want to get rid of us. And so their attacks are likely to be more destructive than the others, unless we find ourselves, in an all-out war, in which case, that's a really scary thought. So,
well, how does the U.S. defend in cyber then? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll go back to when the U.S. was 13 separate colonies, right? We decided that we got to get these British off our back. No offense to any Brits out there, we love you now. But we had 13 separate colonies, right? 13 separate governments, 13 separate organizations that decided to band together, right, to fight off the oppressor. Well, the oppressor right now are these APTs. And we as companies, we as countries, as organizations, whatever, we have got to figure out a better way to band together and collectively defend our networks. I don't think there's any other way around it. You can't expect IronNet, you can't expect Here, you can't expect Home Depot, Lowe's, Target. You can't expect them to be able to defend themselves alone from an adversary that's state-sponsored, right? No one has the capability. But I do think if we band together, we can we can make a significant dent in the adversary's ability to exploit us.
So, and I want to thank you again for your time. Let me ask one more question. I mean, how can companies in the private sector protect America's future prosperity while reaping all the benefits of digital transformation, efficiency, agility, and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I think one of those things is that, all of those benefits of digital transformation, everything's a trade-off. I don't want to say it comes at a cost, but everything is a trade-off. And, an example, right? For years, I've been Ubering, but when I stopped renting cars at airports when I traveled, right? The trade-off was that the good parts were I don't have to worry about renting a car. I don't have to worry about finding the directions. I don't have to worry about any of that. The bad part is now I'm in the backseat of a car driven by someone that I have no idea if they're a good driver or not, right? I've been in some crazy Uber rides, crazy, right? And so I've given up a little bit of security for convenience, right? And we have to remember that we do give up security for convenience when we talk about digital transformation. I think everyone's agreed that the convenience, the efficiencies we gain outweigh the security we've I don't want to say lost, but we've displaced at least. And I think we can get that back again if we figure out how to work better together. I think it is imperative that, especially in the US, right, everyone in an organization, whether it's the janitor, somebody working in the cafeteria, or the CEO, understands that this country is at war. It is not a physical war. It is not a kinetic war, right? It is a war for global competitiveness.
Yeah.
It is a war for democracy, right? And that that we need to treat it as a real danger to our way of life, again, to our competitiveness, to our society. I think people need to understand that we cannot wait. We as a country can't wait for Washington, D.C. to fix these problems, right? The federal government is limited in what they can do. There's always some strain between private sector and public, even when we work together, right? There's still some strain there. And generally speaking, Washington isn't designed to work quickly, right? So we have to remember and understand that we need to take better defense into our own hands in ways we haven't thought about before. You need to understand that we're stronger together. Again, all these companies can't defend on their own. We've got to figure out how to come together and present a unified front. And then I think one of the big things that we need to get organizations to understand is that even if you're in the same sector, you can still remain competitive in business while collaborating for cybersecurity, right? You can do both. They are not mutually exclusive. And like I said, I've seen that tide turn in the 6 years that I've been at IronNet. But I think if we understand those four things, we will go and do something. Understanding is great. Doing something about it is better. If we understand those 4 points and do something about them, we've got a fighting chance.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It just sounds like collaboration keeps coming up as a theme over and over again. So I think it's definitely something we all need to think about. You've spent a lot of time with us today, and I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, and thank you for all of your statements today. Anything that you'd like to add about your company, IronNet, your journey, anything like any fascinating books you're reading right now?
Oh, well, to me, still the most fascinating thing about our company is our founder, General Alexander, 4-star, longest serving director at NSA, founding commander of US Cyber Command, mathematician by training, right? He's a really smart guy. He is unbelievably, the word I use to describe him is folksy. He could come into your house and you would be best friends and at ease, even though he's a 4-star general, in under 30 seconds, right? But the most amazing part about him, and I hope it comes across in your segment with him next week, is that he is absolutely visionary in not his belief of not just visionary in technology, but visionary in how the U.S. and our allies can grow stronger together. Right? It's that vision that drew me to IronNet. It's that vision that keeps me here, and I think it's that vision that we as a country need. So, with that, I got nothing else.
Well, that's fantastic. So thank you, Joe, and thank you, Ken, and thank you, Michael. We are thrilled to be honoring General Keith Alexander next Tuesday with the Harry D. Radke Award. It's given for distinguished contributions in technological innovation in national security. And we could not think of a better person to receive that. As you said, he's a visionary, doing a great deal for our nation. He's spurred innovation. And we're also thrilled that the first recipient, Secretary Gertz, will be the one to help presenting to that. So that's a great sort of tradition that Secretary Gertz and Keith Alexander are providing. So again, thank you again for your time. I too learned a lot, and we're going to put this out so that everybody can see it. And we can't thank you enough for your time.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Enjoyed it.